This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Susie Garrett. Funded in part by
TheStreet.com and Action Alerts Plus, where Jim Cramer and fellow portfolio manager Stephanie Link share their investment strategies, stock picks, and market insights. You can learn more at TheStreet.com/NBR.
The holiday spirit, investors were in the buying mood, sending the blue chips to record highs. 50 times this year, the S&P 500 has hit uncharted territory. Should you be wary?
Deflated natural gas prices plunge, making many a homeowner feel a little better about their winter heating bills. Is this another shot in the arm for the economy? And what now? The president says North Korea's hacking of Sony is not an act of war. So what options are on the table to deal with a rogue nation's attack on an American company? All this and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Monday, December 22nd. Good evening, everyone. More rallies and more records on Wall Street today. The Dow and the S&P 500 closed at new highs as investors went on a buying spree on this holiday-shortened week. Why all the enthusiasm, especially on a day of weaker than forecast housing data and another sharp drop in energy prices? Well, it looks like investors are still upbeat and hopeful about the markets going up in the new year on that Federal Reserve promise to be patient before raising interest rates. Here's the tally at the closing bell today. The Dow jumped 154 points, getting closer to the 18,000 level, and with the blue chip utility index also setting a new record. The Nasdaq was up 16, and the S&P added nearly 8 points, posting its 50th record close this year. More now on the latest sharp drop in energy prices after Saudi Arabia's oil minister said OPEC would not cut oil production at any price and said they'd put even more oil out on the market if other nations scale back on output amid tanking global prices. Now, today, West Texas crude fell nearly $2 a barrel, ending the session at $55.26. Brent fell another 2%. It finished just above $60 a barrel. Now, since June of this past year, the price of crude has been cut in half. Gasoline has tumbled now to a fresh 5-year low, with AAA reporting that gas is averaging $2.39 a gallon nationwide. I got some for $2.21 today. And now the third leg of the energy market, nat gas, appears to be headed in the same direction. Natural gas futures plunged 9% today, hitting a 2-year low. Now, that's welcome news, I suppose, on this first full day of winter, thanks to forecasts for warmer than average temps through New Year's Day and record high production of gas. It's not so welcome, though, if you own natural gas stocks. Take a look here. All the nat gas names got hammered today. Chesapeake down the most, 7.25%. Now, the move in natural gas is good news for U.S. homeowners, as more than half the nation's homes are heated with natural gas and its byproduct, propane. Jackie DeAngelis has more.
Natural gas prices continue to plummet, a near 30% drop since last year, and another leg down today, closing in on $3. The action in nat gas is a supply-demand story. Supply stocks have built nicely, approaching the winter despite last year's extreme usage, but Mother Nature controlling demand, and so far, she's been on our side. This time last year, we were talking about the polar vortex. Now we're talking about 60-degree temperatures on the East Coast on Christmas.
Everything comes down to weather and natural gas. It's been very mild. They're predicting in the short-term future here that it's going to stay mild. And with the North American shale production, predominantly the Appalachian gas, there is a lot of it. There's a big glut of it right now.
Combine the natural gas story with declines in propane prices at 10-year lows, and consumers will be paying a lot less to heat their homes this winter. Then there's the decline in retail gas prices. Consumers getting a big gift from the energy complex this year. AAA saying the national average for a gallon of regular $2.39, 85 cents lower than a year ago. Comparatively low prices for retail gasoline are helping consumers to save more than $450 million a day on gas compared to the highs earlier this year. And that's great news heading into Christmas, as AAA expects nearly 100 million Americans will travel 50 miles or more for the holiday season. That's the most on record.
It's all great for the consumers because there's going to be more money to spend. Let's face it, you're spending less on gasoline, you're going to spend it somewhere else.
How low could we go? Well, if it doesn't get substantially colder, nat gas could touch $3, a huge break from last year's highs over $6. And prices at the pump? Difficult to say exactly, but we could see many more areas of the country dipping under $2 in the near future. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Jackie DeAngelis.
Michael Farr joins us now to talk more about energy prices and the markets. He's president with Farr, Miller and Washington. Michael, nice to have you with us. As you heard Jackie say, last year we were talking about the polar vortex, and this year we've got warm temperatures for the holidays. Is this sort of like a stimulus for the economy and thus a stimulus for the stock market?
Well, it has been certainly, Susie, and wonderful to be with you, and happy holidays, everybody. And yes, certainly these lower gas prices and lower fuel prices are helping the consumer. We're seeing more money left in the pocketbooks, and it's the estimates right now with current gasoline prices are almost $750 per household in savings. So that money is going to go somewhere else, and we've got a GDP that's driven 2/3 by the consumer. This is a good thing for the economy generally.
So, Michael, do you see oil prices and natural gas prices falling farther from here? If so, roughly how much? It feels as though some of the decline has tapered off just a bit in the past week or so.
It does, Tyler, and it does seem to be slowing. You never bet against a trend anywhere on Wall Street, and both of these trends are down and have been for a while. I thought that natural gas was starting to look cheap when it broke below $5. I don't think I was wrong, but we've seen it get a lot cheaper. So I think oil could continue lower. But I learned in 2008, from March 31st to about June 24th, we saw oil go up 47.5% in like 84 days. Everybody said it was going to 200 and the trend was going to continue. When a price of a global commodity moves 45, 47% in a short period of time, probably ought to think about selling it high. And now that it's come down, we probably ought to think about buying.
And what about buying some of these stocks that have been hit so hard, especially looking at the natural gas prices? Tyler was just showing the prices down, stock prices down sharply today. Are there any quality names in that space that you would be buying, and also with big oil as well?
Well, I'm a chicken, as you guys know. So, I have been looking at two companies. I've been looking at Southwestern Energy, and I've been looking at Cabot Oil and Gas. I'm going to stay away from both, but they're both, $11, $13 billion market caps, and I think they're kind of safer. But I'm not prepared to go there yet. I'd much prefer to own an Exxon, where about 47% of the company is still based in natural gas. I get a AAA balance sheet with Exxon and a 3% dividend. Chevron, 32% still is in natural gas. I get a 3.8% dividend, and I'm 14 times earnings. So I'd rather wade in with some of these much stronger balance sheet, much better diversified global companies, and not take the big bet and get paid while I wait.
Okay. Very quick thought, Michael, on 2015 in the market. We've got about 30 seconds.
I expect a continuing up year. I think we're still going to depend on the Fed. I'm going to look for about 10%, but will the Fed actually blink and raise rates? I think the jury's still out whether they do it at all in 2015.
All right, Michael, that's a nice upbeat way to end this conversation. Michael Farr with Farr, Miller in Washington.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
All righty. More evidence of the uneven recovery in housing today. Existing home sales fell more than 6% in November, slowest sales pace in 6 months, despite attractive loan rates. The National Association of Realtors says the combination of stagnant wage growth and rising home prices has reduced affordability and held back some would-be homebuyers.
People signed up for health insurance under the Affordable Care Act will be keeping a close eye on the U.S. Supreme Court on March 4th of next year. That's the date set just today for oral arguments in a case known as King versus Burwell. This case will decide whether to void federal subsidies paid out to enrollees in dozens of states that didn't establish their own insurance marketplaces under the law.
The battle to limit the sky-high cost of treating hepatitis C is heating up after Express Scripts, that's the nation's largest pharmacy benefits manager, said it's no longer going to cover Gilead's market-leading Sovaldi and Harvoni medications. It instead is going to put its weight behind a newly approved drug made by AbbVie. Shares of all the companies involved taking some hits today, especially Gilead. It was down 14%. So could this exclusive deal by Express Scripts lead to lower costs and better access to treatment for subscribers? Meg Terrell has more.
It's the battle that's been brewing for a year, a price war among drugs to treat hepatitis C. When Gilead's Sovaldi was approved last December, it brought the potential to cure more people of the viral infection, with fewer side effects. It also brought a price tag that raised eyebrows, $84,000 for 12 weeks of treatment, or about $1,000 a day. The medicine has been a blockbuster, drawing more than $8 billion in revenue for Gilead so far this year, as well as the scrutiny of health insurers, patient advocacy groups, and Congress. On Friday, a competing drug cleared the FDA, AbbVie's Viekira-Pak, and Express Scripts said it negotiated a deal.
We never disclose drug prices, but we can just say it's a significant discount, big enough to allow us to recommend treating all patients with genotype 1 hepatitis C.
More than 3 million Americans have the viral liver infection, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. About 3/4 have the form known as genotype 1. The virus can persist silently for decades before showing symptoms, but in later stages can cause liver cancer and liver failure. Some caution that doctors and patients may prefer Gilead's regimen over AbbVie's.
The product that is probably slightly inferior, pretty equal, but a little bit lacking on efficacy, a little bit higher pill burden, a little bit more side effects.
The news today drove shares of Gilead down significantly, while boosting AbbVie's. It also weighed on the biotech industry more broadly, as investors feared bigger price wars could be brewing across the industry.
We think there's great opportunities across all those categories, and we have to do something because these prices have become unsustainable.
Global spending on medicines may rise to almost $1.3 trillion in 2018, according to industry researcher IMS Health. Contributing are specialty medicines like those for hepatitis C, as well as those for cancer and autoimmune diseases. The question now is, how far will the price wars reach? For Nightly Business Report, I'm Meg Terrell.
Looks like Russia is headed to a, quote, full-blown economic crisis. That's what a former Russian finance minister says following this year's plunge in the value of Russia's currency, the ruble, and the strain that's caused on its banking system following tough U.S.-led economic sanctions. Just today, Russia's largest bank, Cyberbank, suspended all requests for new auto and mortgage loans, at least until the end of February, and another Russian lender, Trust Bank, had to be bailed out by the government. Also today, Russian oil giant Rosneft terminated a deal to buy an oil trading business from Morgan Stanley, blaming U.S. regulators for refusing to clear the deal.
And now to the latest on that cyber attack at Sony Pictures. Despite canceling the Christmas Day release of the satirical film The Interview, Sony has now done an about-face saying the controversial movie will be shown. One report says it's coming to Crackle, the studio-owned video streaming service. Another is suggesting it'll be released via Sony's PlayStation gaming system. Now, in a statement, Sony Pictures says no decisions have been made just yet. But the president has made his decision. He says the U.S. will, quote, respond proportionally against North Korea, which the administration says is behind the hack attack and accompanying threats. Now, just what those proportional actions are, though, has not been revealed. Eamon Javers joins us now from Washington with more on the cyber attack on Sony and how the U.S. might respond. Eamon, good evening. There are reports of some web disruptions going on in North Korea right now. Any word on what's happening?
Well, we don't know exactly what's going on in North Korea right now. As you can imagine, it's a fairly impenetrable country, Tyler. But what we do know is that late this afternoon, researchers started reporting internet outages in North Korea with IP addresses associated with the North Korean government and North Korean consumers of the internet. And as you can imagine, there's just not a whole lot on the internet in North Korea, maybe a couple of thousand IP addresses tops. But it does appear that there is some kind of disruption or outage of the internet ongoing now in North Korea.
So, Eamon, what is the U.S. or the White House saying about these new developments?
Well, I asked a White House National Security Council spokeswoman about this earlier, and I said, did the United States do anything here to cause any of this outage? She simply responded to me by saying, we don't have any announcements to make regarding North Korea this afternoon. So no confirmation or denial here from the White House.
Be a shame if they can't shop on Amazon here 2 days before Christmas. Eamon, what has the government said about the whole situation today?
Well, they haven't said a whole lot, but we did see a new comment over at the State Department where a spokeswoman there said that the North Koreans might consider repaying Sony for some of the damage that it's caused. She was asked exactly how much the North Koreans ought to pay Sony to make up for it. She didn't say. And one of the problems with that would be that as it stands right now, the sanctions regime against the North Koreans would prevent Sony from accepting a repayment check. The spokeswoman for the State Department said that they might be able to find a workaround for the sanctions for that if the North Koreans decided to pony up the cash. Such a difficult situation. Are there any options on the table? How does this play out? Well, there are not a whole lot of good options right now. Short of an all-out cyber war, there are other things the U.S. government could consider, up to and including putting North Korea back on the state sponsors of terror list. That's viewed as a diplomatic sanction, but not a lot of good options here for the Obama administration as they look down the menu. Eamon Javers, thanks very much. You bet. Well, switching gears here coming up, would you eat 3D printed foods? Well, some companies are betting you will. We'll explain right after this. The Federal Aviation Administration is teaming up with the makers of drones on a new safety campaign to keep them far away from airplanes. With regulators expecting a whole lot of unmanned drones underneath Christmas trees this week, it's launching a new safety awareness initiative along with the Academy of Model Aeronautics, designed to avert potentially disastrous encounters with jets and other aircraft. The FAA receives about 25 reports every month of drones sighted near manned aircraft. Well, another setback to the Comcast-Time Warner merger is where we begin tonight's market focus. The Federal Communications Commission has delayed reviewing Comcast's $45 billion deal to acquire Time Warner Cable. Officials say they need more time to review thousands of documents that Time Warner is expected to submit today. Despite that, shares of Comcast rose a fraction to $57.22. Time Warner was higher as well, up slightly to $150 and change. Comcast is the parent company of CNBC, which produces this program. Boeing helped lift the Dow today with big order news. Air China has signed an agreement to order 60 Boeing 737 jets. That adds up to a price tag of around $6 billion. The deliveries will run from the year 2016 to the year 2020. Shares popped $1.99 to $128.22. Shares of Caesars rose after it agreed to buy its affiliate Caesars Acquisition. It's a deal worth about $1 billion. The financial reshuffle comes weeks before its main operations unit files for bankruptcy. The move, it says, will help the casino operator restructure its debt. Shares of Caesars soared 11% to $15. Caesars Acquisitions also higher, up 3% to $9.76. It's a tough day for shares of Ocwen Financial. The embattled mortgage servicing firm fell after news that its CEO will step down as part of a settlement with New York's top regulators after a lengthy probe of the company's treatment of homeowners. Ocwen will also pay a $150 million fine. Shares down about 27% on the day. They finished at $16.01. American Apparel saw its shares rally after it confirmed that it has been approached with a buyout offer. It comes a week after the company fired its controversial founder. On top of that, the company appointed a new head of the board and it adopted a shareholder rights plan, otherwise known as a poison pill, to prevent an investor from buying more than 10% of its stock. But the clothing maker says that move is not an attempt to deter bidders. Shares were up 6.5% to $1.14. It's worth mentioning American Apparel is, well, you can see it there. It's a small cap stock. And Facebook saw its shares rise to a record price today of $81.88, the all-time high, driven in part by mobile advertising growth and the recent valuation of Instagram, its photography app. As we told you last week, it bought that company for less than $1 billion in 2012. Citi now estimates it's now worth $35 billion. It closed well below that milestone, but Facebook did, but still up $1.57 to $81.45. As we approach the new year, we look ahead not just to 2015, but to the next 25 years. What will the consumer of the future be like? And more importantly, how will they do everyday things like getting their groceries? Sarah Eisen has more on the future of food.
With just a click, these designs are being printed into flavor-packed sugary treats. You can design basically anything that you can imagine in your mind that you'd like to 3D print in sweets. Liz Von Hasselen is the creative director of food products for 3D Systems. Inside her sugar lab in Los Angeles, she and her team are developing new ways of printing edible products. It basically adds the wet ingredients of the recipe to the dry ingredients, just very, very precisely, layer by layer. So it builds up the intricate three-dimensional object in confection, layer by layer. The goal? Putting 3D printers in bakeries, restaurants, and perhaps one day next to the coffee machine on your kitchen counter at home. I can totally see a day when a dad and his son are in the kitchen whipping up, designing together, co-creating a dessert for a soccer game or a chess tournament. Create and then consume. It's something grocery giant Kroger CEO Rodney McMullen isn't sold on just yet.
The thing that I keep wondering about is like 3D printing. And will somebody really feel good about something that's food produced with 3D printing, even though it's to my taste profiles?
Wow. You think there's going to be a world where we 3D print our food?
I think it's possible. Now, whether it actually happens or not, I don't know.
The Hershey Company is already experimenting with 3D printing, working with 3D Systems to print chocolate. And we're told others will be announced soon. But it's not just sweets. Savory and spicy foods could also be part of the equation in the future. I think that this will be a huge part of the future of food and nutrition, and I think that companies that aren't interested in engaging with this technology are going to feel at some point like they missed an opportunity. 3D food printing is in its infancy, and as far as revolutionizing food manufacturing and production, jury is still out. Right now, it's mostly being used for decorative items like personalized candies and funky shapes. But NASA's printing pizza for astronauts, Mondelez printed personal Oreos at South by Southwest, and there is a company called Natural Machines working on Foodini, eventually aimed at the consumer. But there's plenty of work to do experimenting with ingredients and temperatures for food. Watch it in 25 years. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Sarah Eisen.
And up next, the sharing economy, how and why a sea change has arrived in the way many companies are doing business. It may be the season of giving, but it is also a season for sharing. And in this economy, that may mean sharing designer dresses for holiday gatherings. I share mine all the time, or maybe opening up your home to guests, or even sharing a lift with strangers. Sharon Epperson has more.
It's called the sharing economy, where consumers can rent anything from a car ride and designer dresses to vacation homes.
I love the service. It's very convenient.
If you can find a way to, kind of streamline the whole process of finding things and getting things to the right people, I'm sure it could save people a lot of money.
And I get it for way cheaper, and I wear it once and I send it back.
A move away from purchasing an item through a company. Instead, technology can help consumers to connect with one another and rent items for only as long as they need. This type of collaborative consumption is the fabric of Rent the Runway, a company that allows people to rent high-end designer dresses for a fraction of the retail cost.
We have cocktail dresses, we have gowns, accessories, clutches.
This is one I like for holiday.
This is gorgeous. This is a new Marchesa dress. It retails for $895, but we actually rent it here for $135.
NYU Stern professor Arun Sundarajan says these types of sharing services provide more than just cost savings. They facilitate sharing and experience.
What's interesting is that it's also expanding the set of people who can get access to nice things. Because if you look at the demographics of people who are using Rent the Runway, they're very different from the demographics of the buyers of these high-end apparel.
People aren't only sharing party dresses, they're also sharing places to stay. You can rent a spare bedroom or a vacant home from the current owner through services such as Airbnb.
Airbnb has over 1 million listings. I think the largest hotel chain in the world has 600,000 rooms. And even if you measure activity, Airbnb is comparable to a large hotel chain. They'd be in the top 10 in the world if we sort of measure them by any metric.
Ride-sharing services such as Uber and Lyft are also part of this new peer-to-peer economy.
There are over 10,000 Uber cars in New York City. There are 13,000 yellow cabs, and Uber's been here for 2 years. If you compare Lyft to a yellow cab, the quality of cars tends to be better. You can call them on your phone, which, as it gets colder and colder, becomes more and more valuable. And it's priced at roughly the same price as a taxi.
From ride sharing to high-end apparel to renting a stranger's home, the sharing economy offers access and experiences for a fee to consumers just like you. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Sharon Epperson.
And finally tonight, $3 billion in cash prizes up for grabs in Spain's annual Christmas lottery today. It's known as El Gordo, or the Fat One. And one ticket could cost as much as $25, but one person doesn't win the whole jackpot. Instead, thousands of winners split the money, and that works out a pretty good deal, Tyler, for a country that has unemployment at 25%.
Indeed. Lots of winners.
All right, that's Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Susie Garrow. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks from me as well. Have a great evening, everybody, and we will hope to see you right here tomorrow night.
Nightly Business Report has been funded in part by
TheStreet.com and Action Alerts Plus, where Jim Cramer and fellow portfolio manager Stephanie Link share their investment strategies, stock picks, and market insights. You can learn more at TheStreet.com/NBR.
I'm Susie Garrow with a Nightly Business Report news brief. The Dow and the S&P 500 closed at new highs today as investors extended last week's Fed-fueled rally, despite weaker than forecast existing home sales data and another sharp drop in energy prices. The Dow jumped 154 points, getting closer to the 18,000 level. The Nasdaq was up 16, and the S&P added nearly 8 points. Oil prices fell again while gasoline dipped to a 5.5-year low. And now, thanks to peak production and forecast for warm weather, natural gas prices tumbled 9%. And Express Scripts says it will no longer cover Gilead's Sovaldi hepatitis C drug that goes for $1,000 a pill and will exclusively provide a cheaper drug made by AbbVie. Be sure to tune in to Nightly Business Report right here on your public television station.